So today we're going to be talking about ISO on what maps is he good on and what maps is he trash on. And let's start off here with Ascent, but before we do, first let's talk about the double tap, because of course this ability on most maps is going to be pretty much exactly the same, so we're not going to be talking too much about the double tap. We're going to be talking about the other abilities, so let's dive into it, and I'll just show you some things that I kind of liked here for ISO on Ascent. One is, you know, these kind of BXX, right, with an early vulnerable there, sending out your wall, something like this, over towards market, right, blocks off this first part of B main, blocks off market there as you're starting to scale in. Obviously, whilst you're doing that, you can send a vulnerable kind of towards the stairs or towards, you know, kind of towards CT, whatever it is, all quite nice. Over towards A, I didn't think it was quite as good, but there's still some potential here. Of course, once you take a main, you know, something that vulnerable like this is going to be extremely good. Sending the wall out to help people, you know, scale up onto the site is going to be quite nice as well. Now, on the defense side, obviously, these vulnerables are going to be very good for when people are trying to exec onto the site just here. And, of course, on this B side, there's something very fun that you can do in sending a vulnerable down like this. You see how well that covers B main. Obviously, Sovadar or something in there, and Odin spamming with ISO here is going to be incredibly effective. Now, when we're thinking about good ults, obviously, we need some safe corners to ult from, right? For when we get out of the ult, we don't want to be out in the open and just die to the opponents for free. So ults like this are going to be pretty good, right? Or towards the site, you know, from these kind of corners as well, right? An ult like that is going to be pretty good. Of course, we're hoping to catch someone here. And the same is going to be true towards this B site, right? Whether it's an ult, something like this. We want to be doing it from safe corners, but those ults are pretty good. So in general here, I would put Ascent into the ranked only category. Of course, the meta on Ascent is very, very stale, but there are some nice things that you can do with ISO, and I think in ranked, he'll be pretty decent on Ascent. Okay, next up here is Bind, and there's going to be some nice things that you can do over here kind of towards Hooker in general, right? Sending these vulnerables, pairing them with raise nades, but also the wall as well, I think actually, you know, fits this space pretty well. You can see your teammates, you know, scaling up with this wall, covering it, you know, from the site as you then, you know, start to come in. You know, you could see something like that happen, so quite nice. Same kind of thing over here towards Garden that you could see sending a vulnerable up kind of like this angle to, you know, potentially push anyone off there and then, you know, deal with anyone in that corner. And, you know, sending a wall out here to kind of the right-hand side of the box, I kind of like as well, right? Just to, again, help you kind of isolate 1, 2, 3 all on this side whilst not being shot at from over there is quite nice. Now, over here towards a short, I did find the wall in particular quite clunky, right? Like this wall here, if we send it down short, isn't doing too much. So you might think, oh, just send it from here, right? But if any of you watched my YouTube short, you'll see that it just goes up randomly over this box, which means that you kind of, it doesn't do anything for a bit of a time, right? Which is quite annoying. So I found in this area in general, he's, you know, maybe not the best, although the vulnerable from over here again is just good, but the vulnerable in general is just good. So it's okay, but then again, you know, sending it out here is like okay, but again, this wall is just very clunky to use, and you can see it's never really covering everything you want it to. So over towards the safe side, I thought it was a bit more clunky in general. Back over towards the B side though, and obviously sending a vulnerable down B long on defense side is going to be incredibly good. You know, pair that with a flash, easy kills. Now over towards Shower, I think the general geometry is just a bit clunky in general, and I should just quickly note for all of you that neither of these abilities actually go through the teleporter. They just fly through them and don't interact with the teleporters at all. In terms of ults here on Bind, this one seems like probably one of the best ones, right? Covering all of Hooker and a lot of the site as well. You could even, you know, send it over here to cover this cubby as well if you want to. Quite nice ult. And over towards A, probably one of the best attacking ults that you've got is actually over here, just coming in towards Lamps. Of course, if this doesn't go off and you don't find anyone in the ult, that kind of tells you instant information that no one is in Lamps and you don't need to check it. And so overall for Bind, I'm actually going to put it in the niche but playable here. There is kind of a gap for that 5th slot in the Bind meta, and I think that the vulnerables, which is I think by far ISO's best ability, pairs really well with agents like Raze, maybe even Brimstone, Viper, right? It pairs pretty well with some of those agents that we're already playing. Okay, on to Breeze, and outside of A main, where obviously the vulnerables on both attack and defense side early part of the round, right, are going to be pretty decent here. Even the wall actually isn't too bad here in A main either. Other than that, though, it's tough. Again, if you're coming towards the A site, you could send out a wall like this, which, you know, again, is okay. But obviously the map is so big, and this doesn't cover enough area, I don't think, even the vulnerables. So it's going to be tough to find good areas to use here on Breeze, right? There's going to be some, like, again, if you could maybe, you know, get yourself into this corner, but, you know, you send the wall out there, like, look at it. like it's just not doing enough. You know, it's nowhere near kind of the size of the choke point there, right? Sending these down towards, you know, kind of the elbow side of B here, like, you know, there's still going to be gaps in it even if I get to this side. So it's just going to be tough on this map to find a lot of good uses, I think, because the utility perhaps is just a bit too small. And so I'm going to put Breeze in the no category, because even for ranked, I think you'd be better off playing Reyna than ISO. Okay, moving on to Haven, and I think everyone understood that the C long choke point would kind of be where ISO shines, right? You know, sending vulnerables out, something like this could be quite nice. Obviously, sending the wall down there, you know, vulnerable to kind of towards the backside there. Obviously, on defense side as well, very, very difficult to stop, you know, something like this coming in at you, you know, very hard to avoid that. So, pretty good. And I think there's good uses on other parts of the map as well, right? Like, if you want to enter here into Garage, sending the wall in, you know, something like that. This is kind of one of the spaces where, you know, that thing is actually maybe big enough for once, right? And you know, sending in vulnerables again, it's going to be pretty decent. Same if you want to smoke that off and come in this way instead, maybe sending out a wall over towards the platform kind of area. Again, this is quite nice, right? Allows you to kind of scale up, you know, check this corner, check around logs before it actually disappears. So again, some nice things there towards Garage. And the same is true for the B side, right? That you could see coming up here, sending out something like that, maybe vulnerable left, vulnerable right, in we go, you know, getting kills as well. And obviously for the A side, there's stuff like that as well, right? Be it vulnerables down something like this, or something, you know, kind of towards the back of A there, right? Whether it's anything like that. Obviously on for defensive side, you have kind of the breach stun-esque thing going on, where, you know, you can send this all the way out to lobby, right? And this is quite nice in general, right? Sending that all the way out there, pair that with a raise nade in lobby early, you know, you have something pretty decent. And in terms of ults as well, right, this one here from A-Link down there is going to be incredibly good. So in terms of rating, I'm actually going to put Haven at the top of ranked only. He's going to be incredibly good on this map for ranked, but I don't think that the rest of the meta really suits ISO at a high level of gameplay to actually be meta on this map. Moving on to Lotus, and, you know, just coming around here and sending a wall out for your team to potentially cross, you know, is going to be pretty nice early on. Also quite important, I thought, was the vulnerable as well, kind of from where the barriers start here, you know, will reach like this kind of far, you know, as you send out the vulnerable early in the round. And obviously it travels so fast that it probably will hit people, and that probably will push them back, right? They won't want to be taking this fight as they are vulnerable. So, you know, there are some nice things straight off the rip here over towards A. Towards the B side, obviously you've got this long corridor here, so if you are defending B, you know, again, want to chain some util together, this kind of vulnerable in here going to be incredibly effective, you know, especially with a lot of raise on this map as well, going to be incredibly good in general. And over towards C, I think ISO may be a bit clunky. You can see like here, this kind of vulnerable, if you're trying to chain it together with something, might not catch everyone out here towards C. And so you might want to play, you know, kind of back here towards the site instead, you know, and send one out like that, which is okay. But the same is true for attacking, right? Where these vulnerables, it doesn't quite line up kind of perfectly. Like, again, something like this might be okay, but it, you know, might not be perfect. And the same is true for kind of anywhere else you use it on the side, that it might not be perfect. And then the wall, I was kind of struggling with as well, of where to send it. If you send it that way, I don't think it's great. If you send it this way, probably by the time you're out, they can see you again anyway. So this C site, just a bit clunky in general. But there is one insane ult here from this corner in Waterfall that you can see. I mean, if anyone is over towards C, they are getting caught by that ult, and you should be in a very safe corner. And so for Lotus here, I'm going to put him in ranked only. I think that there just isn't quite enough there across the entirety of the map. There are some nice things you can do towards A, though. Okay, on towards B, and I could definitely see something like this happening, right, where you wall kind of the first part there, and then you could send, you know, these vulnerables are going to be incredibly good towards this B site in general. There's, you know, a lot of different angles you can send them, and they're all going to be pretty good over towards this B site, so that's really good. If you do want to save your wall and use it for the site, you know, something like this isn't going to be the worst thing in the world either, right, just covering this off and then scaling into the site. Over towards A here, crucially, the wall probably will give you enough time here to actually cross across and get over towards ramp here, which is quite nice. Vulnerable's not as amazing for taking the A site. They're not awful, of course, because the ability is pretty good, but, you know, maybe not as clean as it is on towards B over there, but, you know, not bad. And if you do come up here towards ramp and you still have a wall, you know, something like this is actually quite nice, you know, for scaling kind of all the way up and potentially, you know, getting into heaven. And for defense side, I actually think ISO is pretty good on this map. Again, the vulnerables through these split choke points, which are quite narrow, are going to be quite nice. Again, this is one of those where you might need to send the wall just slightly left if you want to reposition, or slightly right if you want to come this way, just because of how that works. But, you know, it's still probably good enough. And obviously, if you're playing in mid here, you want to be playing from vents, you know, so that these can kind of work in a straight line here. But maybe isn't the best position, but I really like the vulnerable here for this A main choke point, right? This one is very, very thin indeed, which means that if, you know, if someone is starting to exec on you and you send that out at them, you know, this is just going to be a firing spree, whether it's, you know, even from back in CT as well, if they're just about coming out, right? Like, they're in a lot of trouble back there if you can do that. And just one quick ult I'll show you is actually from the very kind of back of spawn here, that if you send into mid, you're going to see that that is going to catch a lot of people. And so for split, obviously, we're already on a raise map. There's kind of a bit of a gap maybe even in the meta with the jet nerfs as well, so I'm actually going to put him in niche but playable. And then finally, we come to Sunset, and here in B main, there's some nice things you can do, right? Whether it's the vulnerable, but even this kind of wall for scaling early, and that's from both sides, right? Whether that's from the attack side or this defense side just here, you know, using this wall to get up in here early, right? Coming around something like this, you can see is actually quite nice. And over towards A as well, sending both the wall and the vulnerable out here early towards A main could actually be quite nice. You know, this wall actually ends up being not too bad as you kind of scale up with it, and your teammates, you know, are potentially fast coming this way, actually could be decent. In terms of defending on A, you know, the vulnerable here is probably a bit too small, as the wall will be as well, right? Not quite covering maybe exactly everything you would want just there, these abilities. So it could be a little, you know, maybe not the best. Same out here for mid, just in general, right? Whether it's the wall, whether it's, you know, the vulnerables as well, just maybe not quite big enough to like fully cover everything you would want, right? Like even if you want to send a vulnerable out here, you know, they could be back there. It might not fully reach them either, so a bit clunky out here in mid. But sending an ult like this from the A side out early in a round will catch anyone coming either towards A main or in A lobby as well. And so for all of that, I'm going to put Sunset in the bottom of the ranked only. It'll still probably be okay, but again, I think it's going to be probably better options overall. And so that's what I think of ISO overall on some of these maps. Again, we're not expecting him to be a great agent in pro play, but I do think that the vulnerable in particular does have some pretty good benefits. And if they ever make that wall wider and actually useful, then he could actually be an agent that does see some amount of play.